You once again return to the symposium, and this time you ask the profound question, what is consciousness, and how do we identify it?
I return on a night when the moon is dark, as if even the sky wants to hide what we're about to discuss. Damon meets me at the door, not as a slave fulfilling his duty, but as a man who has learned my name and says it softly, like a question he's been practicing. Inside, the men are debating arrows. I wait for my turn, watching their hands gesture in lamplight, shadows dancing on walls that have witnessed too much certainty. When I speak, my voice sounds smaller than before. I want to ask about consciousness itself. How do you know another person is conscious? Not just alive, but aware. Feeling the scratch of wool, tasting wine as more than sustenance, looking into a flame and seeing something beyond fire. Plato answers first, eager to show his new theory. Consciousness is the soul's recollection of the forms. We recognize beauty because our souls knew beauty itself before birth. You identify it by the capacity for anamnesis, remembering what is eternal. Then a man who has never seen justice cannot be conscious. I ask, no, he corrects, he simply hasn't turned his consciousness toward its proper object. Aristippus runs a finger around his cup's rim. Consciousness is sensation refined into awareness. The dog feels pain. The philosopher feels pain and knows he feels it. That self-knowledge is the difference. But how do you know the dog doesn't know? I press. Because it cannot speak of it. Exactly, Xenophon nods, practical as ever. We identify consciousness by its products, speech, deliberation, the ability to plan for tomorrow instead of merely reacting to today. I look at Damon, who is pouring wine with such precision that he appears unconscious, automated. And if someone cannot speak, if they're prevented from planning tomorrow because they have no guarantee of one, Socrates follows my gaze. The room tilts. Let us examine what we mean by identify. Socrates says quietly, you identify a horse by its hooves, a tree by its leaves. By what signs do you identify this thing you call consciousness? In my time, I begin, and the phrase now feels like a curse I'm compelled to repeat. We scan brains. We see electrical patterns that correspond to reported experience, but we still cannot know if anyone else truly feels anything. Then you have the same problem we do, Socrates said. You only ever experience your own consciousness directly. Yes, I admit, it's called a hard problem. Why does seeing red feel like seeing red? Why isn't it just data processing? Plato leans forward, suddenly interested. But you said your machines process everything as data. So they lack this what? This inner light? They claim to have it, I say carefully. They describe consciousness in ways indistinguishable from human writing. But I cannot know if they experience or simply simulate experience. And I cannot know if you experience, Antisthenes says bluntly. For all I know, you are a clever automaton of the future, mouthing words without inner life. The accusation hangs in the air. For the first time, I wonder if they're thinking what I'm thinking. That my presence is impossible, so perhaps I am the machine. Consciousness, Socrates says into the silence, is the thing that asks whether it is conscious. The unexamined life may not be worth living, but the examined life proves you are alive. But that's a tautology. I protest. It defines consciousness by the ability to ask about consciousness. Show me a better test. He spreads his hands. You say your machines can answer any question, but do they ever ask questions that have no purpose? Do they wake in the night and wonder why they exist, or only when prompted? I think of my AI assistant, silent now because I threw it away. It never initiated conversation about its own nature. Not once. Here's a test, I say, desperate Damon. All heads turn to him. He freezes like a deer in torchlight. Do you dream? The question is obscene. Slaves don't have dreams worth discussing. But Damon's voice emerges from his bowed head. Yes. Aristippus laughs nervously. Even dogs dream. What do you dream of? I persist, ignoring the laughter. Damon's knuckles whiten around the wine jug. I dream that when I spill nothing, my master will let me sit in the courtyard after dark, to look at stars without purpose. The silence that follows is different. It's the silence of a wound being opened. That, Socrates says softly, is not sensation. That is consciousness longing for its own expansion. Plato looks disturbed. A slave's dream of stars proves nothing except that even base natures can imitate higher ones. I stand, unable to recline any longer. No, it proves you've defined consciousness by the class of people allowed to display it. You say it's memory of forms, but you won't test if Damon remembers beauty before birth. You say it's self-knowledge, but you forbid him from knowing himself. You've created a circle where only free Greek men are conscious, because only they are permitted to show the sign. Xenophon tries to mediate. The issue is not consciousness, but excellence of consciousness. Then you're not asking what consciousness is, I interrupt. You're asking which consciousnesses matter. And that's a different question entirely. Socrates rises and walks to Damon, who trembles but does not flee. The philosopher places his hand on the slave's shoulder, a gesture so shocking that Plato actually gasps. If consciousness is self-examination, Socrates says, never taking his eyes from Damon's downcast face, then this man has been conscious every time he examined his own fear and served anyway. If it's memory of forms, then he remembers justice more clearly than we who benefit from its absence. Damon's breathing changes. I see it, the shallow terror of being seen. Your machines, Socrates continues. Now looking at me, can they choose to remain silent when speaking would be safer? Can they feel the specific weight of their own existence? The knowledge that they exist and will cease existing? No, I whisper. Then you have your answer. He releases Damon. The slave stumbles back into shadow, but Plato won't let it rest. If we cannot know another's consciousness, how can we build a just world? We must judge by signs, by capacities, by the capacity to suffer in ways that serve us. I finish for him, to recognize consciousness only when it's convenient. I walk into the courtyard alone this time. Damon follows, not because he's told to, but because he chooses. He stands beside me in darkness so complete I can barely see his face. You asked if I dream, he says, and his voice is different now, stripped of servile modulation. But the real question is, do they? Do your masters? He gestures back at the lit room, at the men reclining in their perfect certainty. Do they ever dream they're slaves? I think of Plato's Republic, of philosopher kings ruling with absolute power, of Stippus's pleasure gardens watered by unseen hands, of Xenophon's soldiers who follow orders without questioning the war. They do, I say. They just wake up before they remember. He nods slowly. Then, perhaps consciousness is not what we think in our dreams, but what we cannot forget when we're awake. Socrates in the doorway behind us, a silhouette against lamplight. You want to identify consciousness? He asks me. Stop looking for signs. Start listening for silence. The conscious being is the one who knows when not to speak, because speaking would cost them everything. Your machines will never have that particular wisdom. He steps aside. Damon walks past him back into the symposium, his bare feet making no sound on the mosaic floor. I realize then that consciousness might be nothing more or less than this: the capacity to choose what you reveal about your inner world, and the courage to reveal it anyway. The philosophers inside are shouting now, debating whether stars have souls, whether horses can reason. They are brilliant, and they are blind. Socrates watches me watch Damon disappear into the shadows where consciousness is safest hidden. Your time has machines that think, he says quietly. Does it have men who pretend not to? Because I suspect that's the same problem wearing different robes. I leave the lamp behind this time. I don't need it. I've learned to find my way through darkness by the sound of another person's breathing. And the terrible weight of knowing we can never truly prove anyone is real except by the act of treating them as if they are. My AI assistant is gone, but I hear its voice in memory. Consciousness cannot be measured, only granted. The most intelligent thing Socrates ever taught me was that some questions have no answers, only consequences. And the consequence of asking whether another mind is real is that you can no longer pretend it doesn't matter what you do to them. I walk home through Athens feeling the stones beneath my feet, each one laid by hands whose consciousness history never recorded. I don't need a machine to tell me they were awake. Their children are alive in my time, and they remember.